We're back live tonight here on In Focus. Businessman Roy Moodley's security company, Royal Securities, reported to have scored a lucrative tender with the Western Cape government. Royal Security was embroiled in state capture allegations during former President Jacob Zuma's tenure. Western Cape Premier Alan Winde is believed to be outraged at the developments. For more on this, we're joined now by the Western Cape Infrastructure MEC, Tertuis. MEC, good evening. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, and good evening to all the viewers.
Let me explain to the people of South Africa and the people of the Western Cape, how does the provincial government find itself in a position where you are doing business with alleged profiteers of the state capture era?
Well, indeed, the emphasis is on alleged, given that all supply chain processes are governed by the PFMA and the National Treasury regulations, which are the only tools at our administration's disposal, which outlines when bidders can be excluded from the tender process. Now, unfortunately, both these, the PFMA and the National Treasury regulations currently, they do not afford us an instance where we can automatically just, exclude a company or an individual from a tender process unless, obviously, they have been blacklisted by the National Treasury or they have been found guilty through a judicial process of committing either irregularities in a contract they had or have, or it's been confirmed as well. So, unfortunately, we are a provincial government with respect to the rule of law in the current processes. Obviously, I share the Premier's outrage, but, until a person is found guilty and the way that the current structures and regulations are in place, it pretty much does not leave us with a lot to do. The second component of your question, I think, is crucial, given that the alleged individual was flagged in the Zondo Commission report. However, as much as we don't condone this, and I am aware that the Premier has written a letter to Judge Zondo about the Commission's findings and what the actual status of this is in terms of the NPA, given, that I believe other provinces will also be confronted in due course with what we are being confronted. I think what also stands out in this regard is that even the Auditor General of South Africa also has current contracts for the same company that you've just highlighted in your introduction.
Yeah, it's just that we find ourselves in a situation, for example, like it's not in the Western Cape, it's here in Gauteng, in Tshwane, yet again, a company that is currently before court around the asbestos matter, seemingly was, again, given a lucrative hundreds of millions of rands contract to fix the wastewater treatment plant in Tshwane. And, of course, the Democratic Alliance raising, again, red flags about that. There seems to be inconsistency. You cannot be raising red flags while, on the other hand, you're saying, oh, well, our hands are tied. We can't really do anything about it.
Well, look, as I said, the current PFMA, which regulates provincial and national governments, local governments such as Tshwane have the MFMA, that yet the National Treasury regulations, outlines what we can do and what we can't do, and when an individual is blacklisted. I mean, as a provincial government in the Western Cape in 2021, we attempted to terminate the contract. That individual, that company took us to court, the High Court in the Western Cape, and we were found wanting. And I think what is crucial in that High Court judgment of 2022, which I think is important for our listeners and our viewers to understand, is that even the judge in the Western Cape High Court pointed out that due to the limitations in the Treasury regulations, we were found wanting, even though we could prove certain things in accordance with certain allegations. So I think this is a crucial point in terms of the supply chain regulatory space within which national and provincial government finds itself, and to an extent local government, that there are certain changes needed, given, that certain elements were flagged in the Zondo Commission in other areas. We deal with individuals that have alleged connections to the underworld. And, the current regulatory framework is what is the problem. And we are lobbying for systematic changes in that process to empower us to ensure that this does not happen again moving forward.
Did you do due diligence, MEC, on this contract?
All due processes were followed in accordance with the regulations, and once again, the outcome of that process is respected because it did follow all due diligence processes.
Yeah. So,
every step of the way.
So are you saying, as the province, you could have read a report by the Zondo Commission that says this said company was indeed paying 64,000 rands salary to former President Jacob Zuma on a monthly basis, even after he was made president? You would have read that and still went on and said, this is the company that we're going to give the contract to.
In its current state, you need to understand there's the Zondo Commission's findings. The NPA needs to explain to us what is the status and what actions they have taken. The same individual or his company in this case was not blacklisted by National Treasury in any form, because in accordance with the current regulations of the National Treasury and the PFMA, they have not been found guilty by a judicial process. There's no judgment listed against them which would raise an immediate red flag on the current system.
Yeah, but MEC, my question is a little bit more pointed. My question is, the DA says where we govern well, right? You would have done your research if you're saying you've done due diligence. You would have picked up that this is a company that is cited in that report, whether the NPA is pursuing it or not. You would have seen that, and you are telling us that you would have still gone ahead and picked that company.
So we also need to understand those are allegations. They have not been found guilty by any court of law, and the current National Treasury regulations only permits our supply chain process to blacklist an individual if they have been found guilty by a court of law or through a judicial process. And none of that has happened, which is why the Premier wrote to Judge Zondo so we can get clarity on what the stance is, but also when the NPA will be taking actions, which is, I think, the bigger question at play here.
Yeah. So you, as the province, you do not have a means of blacklisting companies, of people probably who are in that particular state capture report?
At the moment, we are doing a review of these regulations, and we are engaging the National Treasury as well regarding our concerns, which we do have. But also, this also highlights, the need for them to update their regulations as well. So we are busy with that at the moment as a plan of action moving forward.
So at this particular point, what are you saying? You are making suggestions to National Treasury to change their regulations in order to allow you to change yours?
No, indeed, because the National Treasury regulations overrides and guides all provincial governments in terms of the supply chain processes. So you go back to the source which regulates your supply chain processes, which is the due diligence process to do, but also legally the correct thing to do. And as a party that governs in the Western Cape, we respect the rule of law, but also in their shortcomings, we do flag it and highlight that in a good spirit of intergovernmental relations, which in this case is now needed as well.
So why would your Premier, who is the political head, be so outraged if he knows exactly that the position is that unless National changes the regulations, the province can't do anything?
Well, the Premier and I share his outrage is because we have regulations which have not kept abreast with the reality since the Zondo Commission. It's an outrage that, we have a legal document which has found to a certain extent after a vast number of interviews, certain individuals playing a massive part in the state of capture of our national government. Yet the NPA, who is now tasked with action after that, has done nothing. So, which is why I share in this outrage, and all our viewers must share in this outrage, because we have a document which is flagging a lot of irregularities which led to the state capture, yet the organs of state which are now tasked to execute what Judge Zondo did in his team worked hard on, and they've done literally nothing to date. And that, I think, is the ultimate outrage which we all must share, that are law-abiding citizens of our country.
No, but did you speak to him? Did you say to him, I understand your outrage, but this is the situation? Because he says this is unacceptable. That's what he says. Did you speak to him? Did you speak to the Premier?
Once again, I share the Premier's outrage.
You haven't spoken to MEC.
I have spoken to the...
What did you say to him?
I have spoken to the Premier.
What did you say to the Premier?
The Cabinet, we engaged the Premier.
What did you say to the Premier, MEC?
Well, once again, everything I've just reiterated in this interview is what I told the Premier.
Yeah.
And, hence also the way forward to deal with this as a Cabinet, not just myself, but my fellow Cabinet members, how to deal with this moving forward. to tighten up the supply chain process. So I'm in full support, like the rest of the provincial cabinet of the Western Cape, in our previous approach.
So did he tell you that he is doing everything in his power to end this practice? And what did you say?
Well, we fully support our previous approach, being well aware of his letter to Judge Zondo, and also, the certain inputs that we've given through to our administration, through our own Director General, was also part of our discussions to ensure that, we tighten up the screws, we identify the current grey areas within the supply chain process that's linked to the National Treasury regulations. So as a Western Cape government, we can make a constructive contribution to prevent this moving forward. Hence, we are an accountable government.
10 of the 14 bids were disqualified. Why?
Well, obviously, there's a supply chain due process, and these individuals or companies would have been obviously not been part of the final list for specific reasons, which is listed in the supply chain process, because it's an administrative process. And, those companies that were ultimately unsuccessful would have been provided with a reason, or they can actually, through our provincial treasury, also inquire the reasons why they were not successful. It was in the right, it's within the National Treasury regulations as well.
Yeah, the Daily Maverick report suggests that actually Royal Security did not come out tops in terms of price. They were actually a little bit higher. There were others who were much cheaper in terms of the price. Is that true?
Well, firstly, the article is speculative, and what they fall short of fully expanding, the extent of what the National Treasury regulations are currently grey areas on, is that the same company has got tenders that are still active with the AG of South Africa, with other provincial governments in other provinces, with other municipalities in other provinces. So a more objective article would have stated the true facts. This is singling out a single province, when yet the same company, for the same reasons, are also doing business in other provinces because of the failure or shortcomings in the National Treasury regulations and the current guidelines of the PFMA as well.
Right. Were there other bidders, though, MEC, who submitted a lower bid price than Royal Security?
Well, first and foremost, I'm not part of the supply chain process. Any individual who would love to get the information can obviously follow due process, but we have oversight to ensure that all processes are followed. We don't, in the Western Cape, interfere in the processes.
Yeah, we know, MEC, right now that you do get a report. Yes, the accounting officer gives you a report, so you've got sight of that report. I'm asking you a question that says, did they submit a lower bid than others? Or was there a lower bid?
Well, sir, for them to be the successful bidder in this instance, all supply chain processes were followed, and the reasons for affording them that tender is quite clear in the bid adjudication committee's notes and outcomes. And once again, that can be scrutinized by an individual who wishes to get access to that documentation. Yeah,
but it's a simple one. Is the Daily Maverick incorrect when they say there were others who submitted a lower bid price than Royal Security? Yes or no?
Well, once again, they have the right to access the information, which they required. Like I said, a more objective article would also have highlighted that the same company is doing business in other provinces, which this article is not doing.
So you do not have an answer for us, MEC, at this particular point. You don't know whether there was a lower bid that came through.
I believe I have answered your question, sir.
I'm asking you, was there a lower bid that came through? That's all I'm asking.
What I'm saying is that the successful bidder in terms of the supply chain process was awarded the tender, which is how due process in terms of the supply chain process works.
And so at this particular point, you are willing to protect this particular tender process. You will stand by it with all the powers that you have as the MEC.
So all due processes within the National Treasury regulations and the PFMA that allow this process to take its course has delivered, a specific company in the process, which sadly, as much as one is frustrated and we are infuriated, you need to respect it. But this also highlights certain shortfalls in the current National Treasury regulations and certain regulations in the PFMA that needs to change to afford the supply chain process a much more tighter grip, even where allegations are leveled against individuals, which is what has gone, I believe, is what is infuriating all of us. Is that even with allegations, a process is still allowed to ensure that an individual can be a successful bidder, which is not supposed to be, but we have to respect the current regulations, which say it does allow that.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like you are aligned then with the Premier in terms of doing everything in your powers for this practice not to continue.
No, I'm fully behind the Premier and the Premier's approach here. You need to fully understand that. Hence, I support the call for a review of the National Treasury regulations, a review of the PFMA, the relevant sections. I support the Premier's letter to Judge Zondo about his findings, also inquiring with the NPA the status of the actions regarding the findings of Judge Zondo. So I fully support them, and I'm fully aligned with my Premier in this regard moving forward.
MEC, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. That's the
Thank you very
Western
much.
Cape MEC for Infrastructure, Tertuis.